Welcome to the Blogger Genius Podcast, brought to you by Milo Tree. Here's your host, Jillian Leslie.
Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the show. This is Jillian Leslie. I am a serial entrepreneur. I'm a business coach and a business translator. I take what is working right now in blogging, break it down for you so you can use these strategies to grow your own businesses. I want to share that my WordPress course is up and I am getting such awesome feedback. In fact, I want to read you what somebody just wrote about it. And this is from Risa, and she says, I loved this course. I really thought it was very thorough. I wish I had this course when I first started out because no one teaches you. You just have to figure it out all on your own. So this is a great resource. If you want to take your blogging to the next level, to really understand WordPress and to know exactly how to write killer blog posts, head to milotree.com/WordPress and sign up. There is a money-back guarantee, and I will review the blog post you write in the course. Again, milotree.com/WordPress. This episode is a rebroadcast of my most popular one from 2021. I'm on vacation. This is all about SEO and growing your traffic. So let's launch in. For today's episode, I have Casey Markee on the show. Casey is an SEO expert and works with lots of bloggers. Now, what is SEO? It stands for Search Engine Optimization. This is how you set up your blog and you write your posts in a very specific way so that Google understands what you're doing and therefore your content gets found and ends up in search results. And this, of course, leads to traffic. So this is very important. Google's making some changes in May. We talk about that. And we talk about best practices for content creation. We talk about some technology. If anything gets too technical and you've got questions, please reach out to me and I will be happy to answer them. So without further delay, here is my interview with Casey Markee. Casey, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jillian.
So I've known about you for a very long time, and then I watched you on a webinar. In fact, my husband, who's my partner, watched it and said, Jillian, you have to watch this. And then I thought, I'm going to reach out to Casey Markee and see if he will come on my podcast. And you so graciously said yes. So I'm a big fan of yours, and I'm really excited to talk about SEO with you.
I really, really appreciate it. Again, as we were joking earlier, but I cannot believe that anyone would ever want to intentionally spend an hour talking to me. Just ask my wife. She has a lot of other things she would prefer to do.
And I have a Facebook group. I put a post in saying, what is the one thing you want to really work on in 2021? And the number one answer was SEO. So you are very apropos in terms of what my audience is asking for. So will you share how you got into this weird thing called SEO and what this journey's been like for you?
Sure, absolutely. Let's see, I was born and raised in Kansas. I went to school in Iowa, came out to California, which is where I am now, in 1997. To attend law school, where I met my beautiful wife. It was literally the top experience from law school. I had never seen the ocean, so needless to say, I spent way too much time on the beach and not enough time in contracts, which is why she continued on in law school and I did not. So after that, I decided, well, I wonder what I'm going to do now. I always thought I was going to be an attorney, and there was various internet startups. It was like the heyday in the late 1990s of the internet game here, well before the dot-com bubble. And I started to just work at various internet pop-ups, startups there. And at the time I was doing an MBA at night to finish that. And I started working for companies like NextGift, which was kind of a first foray into, their goal was to sign up Hallmark stores and sell cooperative discounts. So that was interesting. So it was kind of an online, one of the first kind of online gift stores there. And then I was working with companies like Magnetic Mattresses and eventually my soon-to-be father-in-law decided that he was done working for corporate America, and he thought, you know what? I think we should get into this internet thing, this internet 2.0 thing. So he decided to buy an outdoor retailer called Coastline Adventures, and he says, I want you to come on and run it. And so we came on and ran this outdoor gear store. It had Sunto watches, which are these acclimators, declimeters on them, and stoves. And we did that for a couple of years, very successful. And then after that, I just went in and started my own SEO shingle with MediaWise, and the rest is history. I've been doing this for almost well over 20 years. Crazy.
Wow. And was SEO even a thing?
Oh yeah, the days of Lycos, Dogpile, Excite, GoTo, well before Google was on the scene, and it was crazy at that time because it was really all about over optimization of keywords and links.
Right. And there were all these ways.
Yeah.
These ways to kind of manipulate the system.
Oh, very much so, very much so. Or you could even go to GoTo.com, which became Overture, and just literally buy your keywords so that you could always be number one, which was crazy. And that just, you started there, and then, you work your way up, and then Google came onto the scene and started to refine search. And now it's more of a science than anything. It's definitely evolved. I have literally seen it all. It has been an interesting journey, to say the least.
I have to ask this question. I ask this of my husband a lot as well. Do you think there are still ways to manipulate SEO?
There are. I mean, that's where you get the old black hat, gray hat, and white hat systems going on. There are black hat web exploitation techniques that still work.
Do you think they work for like, do you think those windows of opportunity then quickly shrink?
No,
Oh,
we can still do code injection. It's just the average person has no idea that these techniques exist.
okay.
Google can close a window, but then Google can close the door, but then next thing you know, there's a window that's been opened to kind of get
Mm.
around those hacks. But yeah, black hat is alive and well. I'm not a fan of it. It does exist. You can combat against it, but for the average person on this call, it's not something you'll ever need to worry about. Just like for the average person on this call, if you see bad backlinks to your site, it's just not something you should ever worry about. I know that a lot of people on this call use SEMrush. SEMrush tends to be very, I guess the word I would use would be aggressive in crawling your backlink profile and telling you, oh my God, I've got all these toxic links. I can assure you, for the vast majority of you, 99.9% of you will never have to worry about toxic links. Google does a great job for you on those, so you don't have to worry about it.
Now, let's say I am a blogger. I am a food blogger, and I don't know much about SEO. How much work does, for all these people in my Facebook group who are like, I want to learn
Yeah.
SEO. How hard is this?
Well, it's certainly harder now. I have been very fortunate. I used to I had started everything from large cap companies to offshore casinos to local SEO with mom and pop companies. And I've been working exclusively with food, lifestyle, and do-it-yourself bloggers since about 2015. So the last 5 years. And in that time, the amount of blogs in the space have grown threefold. It is incredibly more competitive now than it was when I first initially started working within the niche. It is just very, very hard for a new blogger, especially in the food niche, to get traction. And it's not necessarily because all blogs have to build up authority. You could generate traffic from day one from Pinterest and non-Google sources immediately, but it's going to take you about a year to really build up enough authority and content to start kind of an anchoring phase in Google. We used to call this the sandbox. That's really not a correct phrase anymore, but there is still a period of time where it takes you to gain visibility in Google, and that's the case with all new bloggers. So once you get past this 1 year mark, start working on building your bottom line authority, building up the backlink profile to your site, generating solid content, then we could start generating that. But the amount of listings in the search results, so the SERPs, the search engine ranking positions, have not changed. It's still 10 blue links on page one, surrounded by a dozen of other carousels, and that has not changed. So you've got 3 times the sites now competing for that same real estate, and it's becoming much and much harder.
But what you're saying is that first year is about planting seeds that you hope then will grow. So you don't see the growth. One thing I talk a lot about is this idea of consistency, that to grow a business on the internet, it is really about consistency, which is not a sexy concept. It's about getting your butt in the chair and showing up and creating content. So you're saying it's like doing this for at least a year before you see any sprouts.
Yeah, you could say that, for example, it would be like yelling into an empty room, because that's really what you're doing for that first year as you're trying to build the content template that you're going to use. You have to put a level of content down on your site that eventually will stick in the search results, but it might take a while. I have bloggers who approach me all the time. Casey, I've been doing this for 12, 18 months and I just haven't gotten any traction. And in many cases, it's because they just haven't focused on not only the bottom line quality of the template they're publishing, but their keyword research is poor. They're trying, for example, to publish a recipe on a banana cream pie. They have no chance of ranking for it. It's a very competitive keyword phrase. They might rank for that in 4 or 5 years, but if their goal is to generate traffic immediately in the first 12 to 16, 18 months, we need to focus on that long tail. We need to focus on keyword phrases and recipes where they actually have a chance competitively of showing up in the first couple pages of Google. And most bloggers they don't understand that.
Right.
They just believe that they can publish their grandma's beef stroganoff recipe right away and it's going to rank. And so we just, in my case where I focus on site auditing, it's all about tempering expectations, showing them, hey, this is what you can expect. This is the template that we're going to use. Here are the things that we can do from a technical side to get you dialed in. And oh, by the way, you could start including those old recipes that you want to include on your site, but we need to mix them in with content that has a chance of ranking algorithmically. And to do that, we show them how to dial in their keyword research competitively.
Okay, so my first question is, do I need to be technical to understand SEO?
I would say yes and no. I mean, there are technical aspects when I do an audit, which is, I can think why the audit is so eye-opening to most bloggers. It involves 3 areas: the technical issues, the content issues, and the off-site issues. Those 3 pillars, I use the metaphor of a chair with 3 legs. You need all 3 legs to be successful. If a blogger comes in, most of the time it's the technical issues that trip them up. They've listened to a podcast which gave them poor advice. They followed a larger blogger that has strengths they do not have, or they're in a mastermind group which has very poor knowledge base, very poor recommendations. I see that all the time. And so a lot of it is unwinding a lot of that bad advice. When I tell bloggers all the time, if your goal is to qualify for an ad network or to make your blog your life, you need to invest heavily in it at the very beginning. Try to get the best hosting you can afford. Don't use shared hosting. Use a quality host like Big Scoots. Use Agathon, WP Engine. Again, I'm a big fan. Big Scoots is my top recommendation. Their managed WordPress hosting is very inexpensive at $39 a month. You get that immediately, and you are literally faster than the majority of the other sites out there right away.
Yeah, we set up WordPress blogs for people, and the hosting, all of that preliminary stuff. Yeah. We set up so that once then, like that layer is optimized, then you can start building, because going back and fixing all that stuff is a headache, especially after you've created a bunch of content.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you can get a smart technical stack in place, again, kind of as an example, something where you're using Big Scoots with Cloudflare as your CDN, and you've used a quality plugin like WP Rocket to set up caching and minification and all this other stuff right away. And of course, you're using a quality image compression plugin like a Magify or Short Pixel. Just doing those things immediately out of the gate is going to help you considerably, give you a competitive edge. Overall, mobile page speed has been a ranking factor for years. And then, of course, we have things like the Google user experience algorithm, which is going to go live in May. And those all go hand in hand to both your short-term and long-term success as a blogger.
So before we get to that, though, let's go through the other two legs of the stool.
Yeah.
So the first one, technology.
Technical.
And by the way, and again, if you have questions, you can reach out to me or Casey about that, because that can seem overwhelming. But let's talk about the other stuff that goes into being successful.
So the technical side, again, we're looking at hosting. We're looking at making sure that you're using a quality theme, preferably a child theme that is supported. I personally am a big fan of the Feast themes by Skylar. There are other themes out there built on the Genesis framework, which is put forth by Studio Press and owned by WP Engines. Most of those are quality examples. What you don't want to do is invest a fortune in a custom theme and then have that designer disappear, which happens a lot in the food and lifestyle niche, and you just find that you have to redo the entire theme within 3 years.
Absolutely.
So
And one thing,
issues,
just to add to that, one thing that we talk about is, as a blogger, two things. One, you need to be nimble. So everything you are putting in your blog, I always say these are placeholders. You want to have lots of flexibility to iterate and change and learn with your audience. And then the second thing is, people want these beautiful themes. It's your content that needs to be beautiful. If people are noticing your theme, you're in the wrong direction. People need to be noticing your content. Your theme is like the architecture, but it needs to fall to the background so that your content is in the foreground.
That's a very good point. And it's a very good point. And I want your theme to be attractive. That's aesthetically pleasing, but understand that in many cases, that is an outdated, an archaic belief, because previously all of your content, all of your traffic was desktop based, where the interaction on the site was much more relevant. Now that is not the case. 80-90% of your traffic is going to be mobile, and you're not going to find that this huge expensive theme that you've invested in looks relatively aesthetically pleasing on mobile. There's just not much there. You want it to be attractive, but your goal, of course, bottom line, is just to have the site be technically solvent, load fast, present the content in a pleasing way, have increased font size, all those things.
Okay, so legs of the stool.
Okay, so that's the technical issues, and then we want to look at the content. And when we're talking about the content, again, we're using WordPress, which again, by far is the best CMS out there to use. For those of you on the call are using Squarespace or Wix, it's fine. You can continue to do that. You will just not be as successful. Hands down, bar none. I've been doing this a very long time. I have never not migrated a site off of Wix or Squarespace and had them double or triple their traffic or their bottom line income. So you can take that as you will. If you want to continue to tie yourself to a platform that you have to rely on being half as confident as something on WordPress, where we can 100% customize and make as aesthetically and technically pleasing as possible, all good. I get it. I understand that some things like Squarespace and Wix are easier for users to use, but you pay for that in the long run. Ad networks have a hard time monetizing those platforms. We have no control over the back end for speed optimization. The list of negatives goes on and on and on. So when we're talking about content, there's a very specific content template that we work with, that I work with specifically after many years of doing this and thousands of audits, that seems to work pretty well. And my bottom line advice is be useful. Everything that I do with regards to the content is, how useful can I be for the user with this piece of content? And again, I work predominantly with a lot of recipe blogs, and there is a very specific template that I push that, again, has been very successful. So when you hear these stories about, oh my God, I had an audit with Casey and I went from 50,000 sessions to 5 million over a couple of years, it's not uncommon to do that. I feel that my audits have a 10-time benefit at a minimum, but to get there, it involves a lot of little things. SEO is all about the little things. We need to make sure that we're using the right content template, that we're putting in high quality images that are about 1200 pixels wide so that we can best optimize for Google Discover, and make sure that we future-proofed our images if we happen to change themes in the future. We also want to make sure that we're writing content that is helpful.
So can you go through, will you walk us through your template, like very, top line?
Very briefly, because it would take an hour.
Yeah, no. But just kind of, if I am a food blogger or a DIY blogger, they're kind of similar in terms of, you're going to be creating something. How should I think about this?
Well, you always want to sell the user right at the top of the page. Here's a teaser text, a little bit of teaser text on why this recipe or this do-it-yourself is worth your time. What is it about this recipe or do-it-yourself that's better than the million of other recipes or do-it-yourselfs out there? Could just be a couple sentences, but that's what's going to catch the eye in most people right away, especially on mobile phones. What is it right there at the top of the page to sell the user on that piece of content? Recipes is a great example. If you have a recipe that can be made in less than 30 minutes, I better be seeing that you've mentioned that at the top of the page, because my wife, who's a busy professional, she's an immigration attorney, others, they have limited time. They want to qualify that experience right there at the top of the page. Then I have a nice photo, a featured image of the finished dish, for example, or the finished DIY. That image should be 1,200 pixels wide at a minimum, as should all of the images in your post, so that we can qualify for Google Discover traffic and the enhanced carousels that come with that. I should have a very nice template. Think of it as a research paper. Here's why this recipe works. Here's all the ingredients that go into it. Maybe I have a nice photo laid out of all the ingredients that I've labeled. That's a big deal. When we talk about highest meets needs, and you have these things called the Google Quality Rater Guidelines, which is a very dense document that Google has published for years telling users what they're looking for with regards to quality content. If you were to go in and find these Google Quality Rater Guidelines, and you could just type that into Google and search for those, and you were to review that document, just type in recipes. You would be shocked at how many dozens and dozens of times recipes are mentioned in there, because recipes is a great example of a document type, a content type that Google values highly and uses to train other information with. So when we're putting these recipe posts together, again, we have the teaser text, we have a featured image, then we start to have headings on the page. And these headings can be things like, here's why this recipe works, here are the ingredients, here's step-by-step on how to make them. Maybe we have an H2 that says FAQs and expert tips. FAQs, very, very important. If you're publishing a recipe post and you don't have FAQs, that tells me you probably haven't thought enough about the bottom line usability of that post for your users. Go into Google, type in your focus keywords, see if Google provides people also ask questions. Can you steal any of those? And by stealing those, I mean, can we provide a better answer in our own content? Then in turn, maybe Google can lift us up in that placement instead. Then we get down and we have, a call to action, related recipes, and then of course the recipe card. So all of that flows together pretty easily.
What I like about what you're saying is it's not about the story of my grandmother and how we made this. Again, that's like the sweet stuff. Like, we used to make this every Sunday and this is very meaningful to me. You're saying that kind of
personal history.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me, do I write that?
No, I call that superfluous content. And I get it. Maybe there is a little bit of a story behind some of your recipes. And hey, you can put that at the top of the post under the why this recipe works. Maybe you can say, hey, this apple pie is different from all other apple pies because I use nutmeg in the crust. And oh, by the way, this was passed down to me by my grandmother on my farm. That's it. We don't spend 3 paragraphs talking about summers you spent around the lake eating this pie. Now, years ago, when I first came on the scene, I was very clear that this isn't going to help you bloggers. And if your goal was to build your traffic, this was something that you had to kind of move yourself away from. And it was funny because at the time it was controversial. It's not controversial. It's just common sense. Our goal is to write for the user. And I can't tell you how many people have changed their writing style and have in turn bought second homes because of that. And that's something that's very hard for bloggers to understand as creators, that you want to tell your story, but you want to do it in a way that's going to help you build traffic, build a long-term audience, and of course, bottom line, increase the effect of your long-term and short-term SEO.
It's funny. I was talking to a woman yesterday on a coaching call, and she's a DIYer and she wants to do lots of different kinds of DIY, and she wants it the way she wants it. She wants to be doing all of her content. And I said, I think you need to be a specific kind of DIYer. Are you a sewer? Is that what you do? Are you a paper crafter? What is it? And I could feel the tension because I was saying, is this a business? Or is this a hobby, something where you need to put this out into the world? And she did not like that tension. And I said to her, you can choose. I have no vested interest. But if this is, I'm creating a food blog so that I can pass this down to my children and their children, and these are all of, Nana's recipes, that's one thing. However, if this is a business, it is not about me. I always say it's not the Jillian show. It is me serving you.
And that's very, very important. And I try to communicate that whenever I can in both the mini audits and the full audits that I do, or in any trainings I perform, or just simple one-on-one coaching consultations. I ask them right away, is this a business or a hobby? And they tell me, my goal is to have this support my family. I'm like, fantastic. These are the steps you need to do to make that happen. If you do these steps and you follow this outline and you follow this template and you stay in touch, you will be rewarded. I have two groups of clients who come to me. Client number one, they stay in touch. They send me recipes to grade. They let me know how things are going. They do very, very well. Client number two, they'll have the audit. They'll be overwhelmed with the information. They might send me one recipe post. They disappear. I come to find out that 6 months later, they haven't had great growth, or they've had 30% growth, which is still good, but not near what they would have had if they'd implemented the audit. And they'll get pulled away because of other things. They'll either, in the interim, they'll have taken a course which will contradict some of the things that I've said, and of course that will stunt their growth, or they'll be pulled away to do something else, and they're like, well, why am I not having the results? And I'm like, yeah, you're not having the results because you didn't do this, 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 and this. I mean, here's your audit. You haven't even made it to page 2 yet. So it's a lot of it is tough love. And I know the bloggers who commit to doing it. I mean, that's literally why I have a 6-month wait list and hundreds of reviews on Facebook, is that the process works. You just have to work the process.
And you have to let go of a lot of the things you thought it would be.
Yeah, it's tough. There's a lot of misconceptions, preconceptions, things that you have to. I can't tell you how many bloggers still come to me and believe that word count is a ranking factor, even though Google has said multiple times it's not, or how many people will listen to their ad company and take an approach which might be great for their RPM, but will stunt their long-term growth considerably.
Can we talk about that? We were talking about that a little bit before we pressed record. There is a tension. And you even said this to me in an email, this kind of herd mentality.
Correct.
And can you speak to what that means for bloggers and how to break from the norm or what we're being told to do by the herd?
Right. And again, herd mentality, I've never seen it in evidence more than in the food and lifestyle niche. And it's because there are so many people competing for such a small select number of spaces in the search results. They're starting these food and lifestyle blogs because they believe it's their way out of poverty, or it's their way to support their family, or something along the lines. And they'll latch on to some information because another blogger who's maybe a little bit more successful than they are is telling them that they should do this. And this other blogger may giving them this information when it's completely inaccurate and also going to actually harm the smaller blogger, but it's not. But they don't know that because, of course, the larger blogger has all these other strengths that the smaller blogger can't see. You know, I had a blogger the other day. I'm like, where did you pick this up? I said, oh, I was following this other blogger. And I'm like, you have to understand that she has 10,000 linking root domains.
What is that? Can you share what that means?
Yes, linking root domains. That's how many external sites link into your own blog, okay? Those are linking root domains. And for those of you on the call who are not aware of this, link building or links are still by far the most powerful aspect of the Google algorithms. And literally there are millions of little baby algorithms out there, but links are still incredibly important. So when you see, these core updates that have been going through, all you have to do is do a very systematic review, a holistic review of the sites that have been negatively impacted. And a lot of them did not have very strong backlink profiles. That's just one of many factors. It's just certainly not the main one. But backlinks are still incredibly powerful for ranking in Google. So bloggers are always like, I don't understand why these big sites are not being affected by these core updates. Are they immune to it? I'm like, no, they're not immune to them, but they have so many strengths that you don't have that it seems that they're immune to them. They've lost visibility. You just can't see it, because they're ranking for literally tens of thousands of keyword phrases across, the verticals. But bloggers will come to me. I'm like, you can't stuff your headings. One of the big things in the recent core updates is that Google has been penalizing for over-optimization. And there's some truly horrible advice that's been going around in the food and lifestyle niche for about a year and a half, where these courses were telling bloggers, you need to put your focus keyword in every one of your headings on your page. So you might be writing a blueberry pie, and your H1 will have blueberry pie, and then your H2s, and there'll be 8 or 9 H2s on the page, will also all have blueberry pie in them. And your keyword density has just gone off the charts, and they're wondering, well, I don't understand. I'm following this template from this training, and Google seemed to have hit me. And I'm like, yeah, because people don't talk that way. You're writing for an algorithm. You're not writing for your users. And then I would show the user, I would show the audit here. Here's an example of 5 sites that were positively impacted by the recent core updates. Look at their outline. look at what they've done. You see how they didn't even mention their focus keyword in any of their headings, except for their H1 and their recipe card H2, because people don't talk that way. We don't need to say ingredients for blueberry pie. We don't need to say FAQs and expert tips to make blueberry pie. We don't need to say related recipes for blueberry pie. That's just not how Google works. Google moved beyond that years ago, and they're much better using the natural language processing to pull all that intent out. I don't even have to have blueberry pie on a page to rank for blueberry pie. That's how far beyond Google has run. So it's just trying to communicate that to bloggers as much as we can, and just unwinding mistaken knowledge that they've been given either in an outdated course or in some webinar they saw or from their ad company.
What I hear you saying is Google, and by the way, we say this as well, and my husband says this a lot, Google's really smart and just keeps getting smarter and smarter. Therefore, your number one goal is to provide value to somebody who is landing on your blueberry pie recipe, that they know why this is the blueberry pie recipe they need to make. Maybe
Absolutely.
5 ingredients, 30 minutes, who knows? But it's the value proposition to your visitor or your user. That and the text needs to be readable, understandable, digestible, written for somebody. And you said this. What did you say? It needs to be written for a toddler or a drunk person?
Yeah, toddlers and drunk adults. That is something that I'm going to have a shirt with that saying on it. I will probably give it out at conferences. But when we're writing our content, folks, we need to be writing for toddlers and drunk adults. We need to dumb everything down as much as we can. If someone was to make this blueberry pie, you've made this recipe 1,000 times, correct? So go back, think about when you first made it. What mistakes did you make? Was there a problem with the dough? Maybe there was a secret tip that you've forgotten about because you've made this so many times. Do you need to let the pie rest? Do we have to change temperatures a little bit? Do we leave the pie in the oven and turn the heat off for a couple minutes? What is it? Tips and FAQs that we can include in the post to make sure that whoever makes this pie the first time does it 100% perfectly per your recipe.
I wanted to take a short break to talk about how our pop-up app, MiloTree, can help you grow your business. First, it can ask your visitors to follow you on Instagram, Pinterest, Facebook, and YouTube. It can ask your visitors to go to a special link that you set up. It will ask them to join your email list, to shop your Etsy shop, to shop your Shopify store. All of this functionality is baked in, and you can do any and all of these. And because site speed is so important, we made sure that MiloTree would be really light and would not slow your site down. We even use it on our other site, Catch My Party. So pause the episode, head to milotree.com. You can install it in 2 minutes or less. You get your first 30 days free. There's really no risk. So put your organic blog growth on steroids with MiloTree. And now back to the show. Sometimes being too much of an expert is a hindrance because you've forgotten what the beginner is experiencing. So if you are, I did a podcast episode with a quilting quote unquote expert, and she said, I'm not an expert. I'm a couple steps ahead of somebody who wants to do this kind of quilting. And that's been a positive because I can think back to what it was like when I started and all of the issues that I had. So I can relate to my visitor and say, oh, you don't know how to thread the needle, or you're having this I can show you how to do that. So it is about going back and leading people step by step through that journey. And I love your thing of like, what is the thing that because you've done this so many times that you've forgotten, put that step in.
Yeah, and what I try to train bloggers to specifically, especially for recipe bloggers, is for them to understand that in a recipe post, you have the recipe post and you have the recipe card. And those are separate entities, not only to your users, but to Google. So we want to take the most important information from the recipe post, and we need to make sure that we make it to the recipe card. That's why you never publish a recipe post that the recipe card doesn't have recipe notes, because when we have recipe notes, that's you making sure that you're repeating the most important information from the post into the card, because there's a small but growing minority of users that they have no desire to read your content. They're just going to go straight to your recipe card, print it out, and be on their way. And that's why we have things like jump buttons to optimize for those users too, specifically Pinterest traffic, which tends to follow along that customer journey. But the recipe cards need to be a complete entity. We don't need to take everything from the recipe post and repeat it in your recipe card. But if you have a recipe card on your site and it does not have notes, you've done yourself and your users a disservice. You need to make sure that you're repeating your most important information in that recipe card so that when they print it out, they have the tools they need to make this recipe as perfectly as possible the first time.
I think that is so, I hadn't even thought of that. I love that tip. So let's talk again. Have we tackled all three legs, or is there a leg we're missing?
Yeah, so leg number 2 is the content. There's a content template. We've discussed that. When we're looking at the common site, we also want to make sure that we've optimized our category pages. That's very important. Our category pages are basically the windows into the house that is our blog. So we want to make sure that we optimize all those category pages. I tend to no index tag pages. I can count on one hand the sites that have actually generated traffic from their tag pages. So I do a content analysis during the audit, and if I find that's the case, we no index tag pages. But we want to keep category pages open. We can optimize those. We can link to those regularly. Very important long term for building traffic. And so then we get to leg number 3. And leg number 3 are just the offsite factors that go into your success as a blogger. You've probably heard of the concept of EAT, which is expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. Well, a lot of bloggers are confused, but EAT is not an algorithm. I think a lot of bloggers think that it is some kind of magical algorithm that Google can optimize for and that you need to be focused on. It's not an algorithm, it's a strategy, and when we break it down, what we're talking about when we break it down is expertise is showing clear knowledge. We want to answer the right search intent. We want to express clear usability of our content. That's the E in EAT, expertise, making sure that we're showing clear knowledge in our content. So as you said, when we were talking about putting together this blueberry pie, that's where the FAQs and the expert tips come into play, is we're showing our clear knowledge of the recipe. Then we get to the second letter, which is A, which is authoritativeness. And the authoritativeness is really about external mentions to you. It's being cited by others. It's being linked by others. It's being featured by authors. That's the authoritativeness. There are external signals that flow into. So again, you featuring me on a blogcast that has genius in the title helps me, because I am certainly not a genius, as my wife will tell you over and over again. So that helps my EAT, though, by being cited in such a well-known and respected podcast. So I thank you for that. Now, the trustworthiness, again, goes hand in hand with the authoritativeness. So if you're cited and linked to, that means you're trusted. So if you're reading this, if you're listening to this on the call, and you're asking, man, I've been in a rut and I cannot seem to build traffic with Google, start asking yourself, what can I do externally to build my brand? And that's where things like building up your email list, setting on podcasts. Don't think about submitting content to other sites as a guest blogger. Even syndication could help you, as long as you syndicate correctly. But we want to look at those external factors and see, what can I do to build up my own brand identity so that others view me as an expert. So like you said, in your example that you used with a quilter, because you featured her, she is going to be viewed as an expert in the quilting niche by a lot of other people in the quilting niche as well. And just like, again, if I'm featured on a podcast having to do with SEO and the like, my goal is to continue to reinforce my expertise whenever I can, hopefully with the benefit being what I can impart to the audience at that time.
Now, is there value? Is this cheating, or is there value in, I'm a food blogger, I got a lot of food blogger friends, we all link to each other with our recipes?
There is some value, as long as it's natural. Where bloggers get into a lot of trouble with is a kind of a 2 or a 3-way type of link building where they use the same sites over and over again, and that ends up being what's called a link scheme, because it's a calculated strategy with a small group of bloggers, not necessarily to provide benefit to your users, but to hopefully provide benefit in the eyes of Google. And so we want to make sure that we're understanding the intent of something like that. Understand that if Google's very easy at sussing out these kind of link strategies. And as a matter of fact, this is one of the reason a lot of bloggers got hit negatively by the unannounced core update in November of 2019, and then got hit again in January and May for the announced core updates in 2019 or 2020. We also recently had another core update on December 4th, 2020. And it had a lot of the same characteristics, is that if you're going out of your way to interlink with the same group of people over and over again, Google in many cases are just going to ignore those links. They're not going to provide much value for the user, all things being even.
Which speaks to the point that Google's really smart. Like,
well, much smarter, yeah.
It's like, again, as a layperson, it's hard to manipulate Google. So be, again, thinking about writing the best possible content you can. So I want to talk to you about keywords. And you mentioned that, your cream pie recipe, like trying to, banana cream pie, you're not going to rank for that as a brand new blogger, a food blogger. But you could rank for like a longer tail keyword.
Sure.
And so will you speak to that strategy? So I'm a new food blogger and I want to start building my traffic. And I've got, let's say, a banana cream pie recipe that will knock your socks off. But would you not recommend I start there? Or is there a way to tie that into a long tail keyword that I could optimize for? What is your advice?
Well, in that example, I would say probably hands down, it's going to be extremely hard for you to get any sort of traction algorithmically in Google, because that's an extremely competitive keyword. But that doesn't mean that you can't be successful with that keyword with tertiary channels, specifically social related. If you have a great banana cream pie and you are really good with your photography, it could do extremely well on Pinterest. It could do extremely well on Facebook and Instagram. That will tend to send you lots and lots of traffic. I think where bloggers get confused is they think that in many cases social traffic has some kind of a ranking benefit. It really doesn't. Google's really clear that they don't use social signals because it's such a muddy signal and it can be easily influenced. I could literally go out and buy 100,000 repins on Pinterest from Fiverr .com or whatever. So you have to understand that if I can artificially influence those metrics, Google knows that, and that's why it's not going to have much value for you. But if you have a great recipe that you really want to add to your site, add it to your site. Great. Just understand that it may not rank competitively for an extended period of time, and we're talking maybe a couple years. Now, you could certainly optimize. You could say banana cream pie cream puffs or something like that. That would have an example of something that builds upon banana cream pie, not nearly as competitive, has much smaller search volume, and you could probably have some good success very quickly with a phrase like that. But if you have a list of recipes that you want to start with, and they have a value to you from a sentimental aspect, and they may rank eventually, that's fine.
Now, what if I was going to go out, let's say I do my banana cream pie recipe, and then I start doing posts like banana cream puffs or how to, again, I know nothing about banana cream pie, but like how to make cream for, like I go granular. I take the ingredients of banana cream, like the best way to roast your bananas or something like that. And I start building posts that support banana cream pie, and I'm linking them together in a hierarchy. So banana cream pie is kind of the house, where I'm going to house a bunch of these links, and I'm going to like the best temperatures to bake pies or who knows what. And I've got, let's say, 5 different posts to kind of support my banana cream pie post. What is your thought about that?
I think it's a sound strategy, but again, going back to our example, for someone who has literally no authority, they're a new blogger, maybe they have a couple dozen backlinks, they have no earned domain authority, maybe their Moz domain authority is like a 12 or an 11. It's just not going to matter. You can lattice and you can support that content all you want, but you have to be realistic. You're in a very competitive niche. Sure, you can reinforce that information and maybe it'll help other things tangentially, but long term it's just not going to rank. I think where we get into it is where there are courses that literally tell people to do, Jillian, what you're doing, And the bloggers that do it have literally wasted 6 months of their time. 6 months of their time when they could have been focusing their keyword strategy. I recommend a tool called keysearch.co. Keysearch.co, very easy tool to use. It's very inexpensive. It's about $17 a month. And unlike SEMrush and Ahrefs and some of these other tools, Keysearch actually has the Google API. Not a lot of tools actually have access to the Google API because the calls are so expensive. That's why SEMrush and other tools, hey, they may be very popular, but from a bottom line standpoint, they're not super reliable because the data that they use is based upon clickstream data. In other words, it's a guess based upon the measurement of traffic from third-party tools. So if you guys want to, if you're a new blogger and your goal is to get the most accurate information you can, use a tool like keysearch.co, which has the Google API. It has the calls so that you can actually see what the monthly traffic is at least a little bit more closely and find those diamonds in the rough. The reason I like Keysearch.
What is a diamond in the rough? What am I looking for? I'm not looking for banana cream pie.
Well, and again, that's why the tool does a lot of the heavy lifting. So if you use something like keysearch.co, it is a dead simple tool to use. It uses a color-coded method you could put in banana cream pie. And then it will tell you right away, okay, we're going to put in your keyword, we're going to put in your site, and then it compares your site to everything that's ranking in Google in the first couple of pages. And it'll tell you, oh my gosh, look how strong these sites are. And then it'll tell you, okay, banana cream pie is a red keyword for you. It's very competitive. You're going to have a hard time ranking for this. But then it'll start to replicate yellow and green related keywords built upon banana cream pie that you can then pull out examples that you might have a much higher success rate in targeting. I'm all about working smarter rather than harder. And so cool tools like Keysearch will do that. I think where we get into trouble is a lot of these bigger bloggers or a lot of people with SEO experience will come on and say, you definitely want to use SEMrush because it's so popular, and it is. And I've used SEMrush for years, and I've contributed 12 webinars to them. I know the tool intimately. I would not recommend it for a new blogger. It's definitely not going to help you build traffic. It's substantially more expensive than it should be, and it has a lot of accessories to it, a lot of unnecessary reports you're never going to use. So if you're a new blogger and your goal is to build traffic, or maybe you're an existing experienced blogger and you want to benefit, use Keysearch. I don't care if you have 5,000 sessions a month or 500,000 sessions a month. I'm still going to recommend Keysearch. It's an extremely easy tool to use, very easy for you to invest in, and it's going to be a dead simple way for you to see right away on one screen. Okay, here's a keyword that I can't rank for, but oh my gosh, look at this. There's 15 other keywords that actually have search volume. Maybe I can go ahead and target one or two of those.
Oh, I am going to check it out as soon as we get off this call. So one last thing I wanted to talk to you about was this whole thing about this algorithm change that's happening in May. Can you explain what you call it the Google UX experience, I guess, update?
Yeah, it's a user experience algorithm that's going to go live in May. And the user experience algorithm it's something that Google has been publishing, let us know about for the last year. And it's just a new algorithm that's going to be using a combination of metrics, including web vitals and other things. So for those of you who are not familiar with it, when Google measures page speed, they use very specific metrics called core web vitals, as they're called. And again, I don't want to bore all of you to death. So very quickly, the three most important of these core web vitals, the first one is called largest contentful paint. And it basically measures loading performance. Very simple. The second one is called first input delay, and it measures interactivity. In other words, to provide a good user experience, you want to make sure that pages start popping on the screen very quickly, usually within a couple hundred milliseconds. And then the last of these core web vitals is called cumulative layout shift, or CLS. And the cumulative layout shift measures visual stability. And this is a tough one when regards to bloggers who are struggling to optimize for these core web vitals, or bloggers who are struggling to optimize for page speed. CLS is their breaking point, because CLS is impacted by their theme, the amount of JS and JavaScript and CSS they're running, and most importantly, by their ads.
And just so people know, this means when you're loading the page, things moving around?
Yeah,
or
exactly.
are they static? And Google does not want things moving around as the page loads. Am I right?
That's exactly it. Exactly it. So if you find that, I'm looking on your page on mobile and then all of a sudden you have some SMO buttons that pop in and start to move. Maybe they pop in 2 lines and then they move to 1 line. That is enough shift for Google to downgrade the page. Or maybe you have in many cases, especially if you're running ads, most ad companies, whether it's Mediavine, AdThrive, Gourmet Ads, doesn't matter. They do not run 100% fill. So what that means is that you will have empty ad containers on your site that will just collapse down, causing a shift that you might not even be able to see. But hey, the algorithm does. And so that's why if you have the ability.
Could you hear that? There's a huge,
oh, yeah.
We're having a huge storm. So if anybody's hearing this kind of background noise, that's what that is. And that was just like huge. Like one thing about Texas versus California, we have big weather.
Big weather,
which is we're getting used to, but that was big weather. So you might hear more. But anyway, it's
Not
exciting.
Not a problem. So again, just very briefly here, when some ad companies are really good about being proactive on the empty ad containers. Mediavine, for example, has the ability for you to go into your dashboard and opt into what are called PSAs, public service ads, so that whenever you have an empty space on your site, it's filled with a PSA and therefore no shift happens. Hopefully AdThrive and some of the other ad companies are going to do this in 2021, which will help alleviate some of your issues. But for most of you on the call, this is probably news to you, and it's something that you should reach out to your blog support and go to the PageSpeed Insights tool. Pop in a URL, Google PageSpeed Insights tool, scroll down and look at the cumulative layout shift. Look at the CLS measurement of your pages. Most likely it's in red. Go into your search console. Go under Core Web Vitals. See if Google is giving you all these warnings for mobile. An important distinction. Don't worry about the desktop. Google's not using the desktop signals at all. Don't waste your time. Your goal is to concentrate on fixing the mobile errors specifically. And you'll want to do that before this algorithm goes live in May. Now, this algorithm, again, involves these 3 metrics, the largest contentful paint, the first input delay, and the cumulative layout shift. And then it involves literally 4 other metrics that all of you, in many cases on the call, you're not going to have much issues with. There are things like mobile friendliness, HTTPS, if you've done HTTPS, they're making sure that you're not using intrusive interstitials. And the other one is just security, making sure that you don't have any malware warnings. So for those of you on the call, usually you're nailing those 4 metrics without having to worry much. It's the core web vitals that we briefly touched upon that you'll probably want to focus on investigating and fixing whenever possible.
And before May.
Now, is this algorithm going to be a big deal? Hard to say. Most of these algorithms, for example, Google, again, has billions of algorithms. We have things like the page layout algorithm, which has been live for a long time, and that penalizes sites who run aggressive above the fold ads or no real indexable text above the fold. That's been live for years. We also have a mobile interstitial algorithm, which penalizes sites that on the first click from Google, they have a huge pop-up which covers most of the screen, or you're running pop-ups that don't have an exit intent. We have algorithms that involve everything. And so sometimes those algorithms, even there's a mobile friendliness algorithm. There's a page speed algorithm, but those tend to have very small or minute effects. In many cases, they're like tiebreakers. So let's say you're a site and you're competing against another site for the phrase banana cream pie. Maybe you guys are very close on a lot of metrics. Well, if you fail this user experience algorithm, this UX algorithm that goes live in May, maybe that's enough of a tiebreaker for the site above you to stay there. So this is how you should be looking at these algorithms. It's, we really want to try to fix as much of this stuff as we can. As I said earlier, SEO is all about the little things. We really want to fix all this stuff as much as we can.
I think that is terrific advice. One last question. Word count, you mentioned it. Does it matter? Mm-hmm. The kind of word on the street is Google wants authoritative, fleshed out posts. So not with filler text, but with real text. Mm-hmm. And that if you can provide that value, you will rank higher. Therefore, a larger word count would probably come with a full fleshed out post. What is your take on that?
It's just not really true. And here's why it's not true. Google is getting ready to introduce passage indexing. It's a new algorithm that's going to go live here in the next couple months in 2021. And the whole point of passage indexing is for Google to actually go into the page, pull out the paragraph of content that's most relevant, and show that specifically in the search results. So what does that tell you? It just tells you that, again, Google's kind of tired of having to go through a lot of superfluous, unrelated information to get to a better user experience for the user. And that's why they're pulling out this passage indexing specifically in the search results in 2021. Now, I mentioned previously when we talked about the recipe content template, how important things like expert tips and FAQs are. For those of you who are doing that, this passage indexing algorithm should only benefit you. This is something where, again, we want to make sure that you're putting the most important information you can for the user. Google's just telling you, hey, you don't have to do anything at your end. We're just going to go ahead and start pulling that information out ourselves a little bit easier. And for those of you in the call who might be familiar with things like featured snippets and passage indexing are completely separate things, completely different algorithms. So even though they sound similar, they are not. So understand that with the passage indexing, don't take some course saying, I'm going to teach you how to optimize for passage indexing. Don't listen to some SEO that says, I can show you how to optimize for passage indexing. This is just a change on Google's end, where it's going to make it easier for a lot of you bloggers who maybe have been a little bit more verbose than you should be. This is going to help you. It's going to make it easier for Google to pull out that information. With regards to word count, like I said, I mentioned this to you before when we were talking on the call, or before we started the recording. Word count is not a ranking factor. Google has said it multiple times. It's just that, again, if you have something that's a little bit more detailed, it does tend to do a little bit better. But I can, again, there are literally millions of queries where you just don't have to worry about having an incredibly detailed piece of content to rank. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. And it's so funny because I have these bloggers who will try to, okay, well, this is a competitive keyword. I just need to write a 1,500 word recipe post and I'm going to be able to steal that. And that's just not how Google works. It's all about quality, not quantity. And that's what we're looking for, is we're making sure that it's easy. Consider using a jump menu. If you have really long pieces of content, use jump links at the top of the post to get users to go around that. Google loves jump links. They'll index that. That helps you.
And those, by the way, are where you see almost like a table of contents.
Exactly,
and if you
right at the top.
click it, and they're all hot links, and you click it and you end up in a certain part of a post. I personally like those a lot as well.
Yeah, those are built in. That's an option built into the Feast themes by Skylar over at Feast Design. And if you don't have a Feast theme, not a problem. You can use a plugin. I recommend Lucky WP Table of Contents. It's a great plugin that provides a really great way. It'll just pull out the H2s on the page and make you a custom jump menu that you can input at the top of your pages. But yeah, it's all about quality, not quantity. Do not think for a moment that every one of your posts needs to be 1,000 plus keywords or 1,000 plus words in scope. And I think a lot of this word count nonsense has come as a result of ad companies, because what does that mean? Longer content means that they can stuff your content with more ads. So understand that there might be another kind of practice going on behind there. Maybe there's another reason why they're trying to get your content to be longer, not necessarily because it's a great benefit for users, but it allows them to monetize your pages a little bit more. So again, if you can write something in 500 words that is just as high quality as someone who spent 1,500 on it, I think you're in good shape.
Oh, I think that is very important for me and my audience to hear. So thank you for clarifying that, because I think that is, 2,000 words is kind of the go-to.
It's a lot. It is a lot.
And it is a lot. Okay, Casey, I have one last question. And this actually comes from David, because he wants, we, as I told you, we coach and we talk to our groups about this. There is a trade-off. Bloggers have a limited amount of time. And there is, on one hand, optimizing your posts, like thinking about it in terms of the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, right? How optimized does my post need to be for SEO? And is it a better use of my time to kind of do the 80-20 rule in terms of optimization so that I can spend that time creating more content?
Let's talk about that, because 80% of your content will generate about 20% of your traffic. Well, 80% of your traffic, comes from about 20% of your content.
Right.
And I think the problem is content auditing. Where we get into this belief is that you need to generate more content to generate more traffic. That's actually inversely incorrect. That's why content auditing is so important. I cannot tell you how many bloggers have come to me that have had 500, 1,000, 1,500 posts. We have eliminated half of the content and quadrupled the traffic in less than 6 months. And the reason that is because Google operates on a quality, not a quantity model. There's an algorithm called the Panda algorithm that has been around since 2011. It is literally Google's main content algorithm. Panda grades on a page level basis. It penalizes on a host level basis. So if I've got our site and it's filled with a lot of lower quality, lower purposed, non-visited content, that hurts you. It brings down the root quality of your domain, and you'll find that it's like blogging with the parking brake on. So my goal for you on the call is to please conduct a content audit. Look at the content from your Search Console. Go into your Search Console, export out 90 to 120 days of data. Look at what Google has been visiting. Look what Google has not been visiting. Bucket that content. Bucket the content into 3 buckets. Bucket number 1 is content that I can update today, tomorrow, next week. There's no seasonality component on it. Bucket number 2 is content that has a seasonality component. If I'm doing a content audit and I see that I've got all these contents with pumpkin in it, and it is not the fall, I am not going to touch those posts until they're seasonally relevant. But I'm going to make a point to go back maybe in August or late summer, and I'm going to republish or repurpose those posts to make them better. Maybe I have missed headings. Maybe the font size is too small. Maybe the content's just not high quality. Whatever is necessary. We're going to republish that content when it's seasonally relevant. For those of you on the call, again, we're looking at January. We're looking at January and February right now. Now is the time for you to start thinking about your health-related content. Everyone's going to be back on the health train right on January 1st. So for the next couple months, you should be focusing on that content that has a health focus, something maybe that's healthy. If you're, healthy banana bread, healthy banana cream pie.
Right.
I'm looking for that, all that. And then bucket number 3 is content that we're going to no index or delete on our site. And yes, that exists. Maybe it's content of a personal nature. Maybe it's content where, hey, I went with these friends to a food blogging conference, or maybe it's
a giveaway from 2005.
Yeah. So, usually we tend to no index first, delete second. But when we no index something, Google's not going to count that against us algorithmically, but Google's still going to crawl it and take up our crawl budget. Now, crawl budget isn't an issue for most sites, but it absolutely is an issue for larger sites. So ask yourself, if I have a piece of content on my site, is this something that my users are going to be interested long-term? Is something that I have a chance of ranking for? If it is something that provides value to my users, then yeah, I'm gonna rewrite it, leave it open to Google. But if it's of a personal nature, hey, it's expired content, like you said, a giveaway, I'm probably going to no index or delete that content. Expired giveaways especially, I'm going to delete. No reason to keep those. We delete those immediately. But yeah, if it's of a personal nature, like, oh my gosh, I have a whole series of posts on how I plan my wedding, which I see a lot of on food blogs, or I have a whole series of posts about I took family vacations. We want to keep those memories. It's fine. We don't want you to delete those. You're just going to no index them. And please, folks, do not unpublish those. When you unpublish something, you just create a 404. No reason to do that. Just no index them, move on. You're good to go.
Oh, Casey. Well, I feel like we could go. I would love to invite you back for a part 2 because I still have so many questions.
Absolutely. Again, as we mentioned earlier, I am just shocked that anyone would want to listen to me for more than an hour. So I appreciate that. It's good.
Oh my God. So Casey, how can people reach out to you, especially after this? I'm sure their heads are just filled with questions. What should they do?
Okay, yeah, you can find me at MediaWise.com, MEDIAWY is in yellow, SE.com, MediaWise.com. Also find me on Facebook. I'm in the largest food blogging groups there, Food Blogger Central, Food Blogger Friends. I try to get in there every day and answer questions for users. You can also find me on my Facebook page, facebook.com/MediaWise, or follow me on Twitter, MediaWise. But yeah, always interested in connecting with new bloggers, and I really wish all of you the very best.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks again for having me, Jillian. Thank you.
I hope you got some good, juicy SEO knowledge and advice from this episode. For me, my biggest takeaway is that every piece of content needs to have intention behind it. Every piece of content grows your business if you know how to and serve your audience. I feel like a broken record with that. And if you're serious about blogging and writing killer blog posts, check out my WordPress course at milotree.com/WordPress. I think you'd really like it. And I will see you here again next week.